The relationship had always seemed perfect at first. The chemistry between us was undeniable, the laughter endless, and the future appeared bright. But as time went on, small cracks began to show. It wasn't anything drastic at first. My partner, let's call him James, would occasionally be distracted by work or his friends, and I would feel a pang of loneliness. I convinced myself it was nothing, just the usual ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. But deep down, I felt something shifting, something slipping away. I noticed the little things more now. James would come home late, his phone always attached to his hand, and his attention was often elsewhere. We hadn't gone on a real date in months, and our conversations had become routine. It wasn't that we fought, but the spark seemed to be gone. I tried to ignore it at first, focusing on my own hobbies, spending time with friends, but the emptiness started to eat at me. There was a constant hum of dissatisfaction lingering in the background. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt abandoned, emotionally neglected. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what happened to the connection we once had. That's when I met Alex. He wasn't anyone special at first, just a colleague from work who'd been around for a while. He had a warmth about him, a charm that made him easy to talk to. We started having lunch together occasionally, nothing too intimate, just casual chats about work, life, and the small things that seemed to matter in the moment. But over time, something changed. There was a familiarity in his presence that I hadn't realized I missed. Alex listened to me, truly listened. It wasn't that James didn't care, but there was something different about the way Alex made me feel seen. At first, I brushed it off. He was just a friendly coworker, and I told myself that there was nothing wrong with enjoying a simple conversation. But the more we talked, the more I realized how much I was craving the attention he was offering me, attention I hadn't felt from James in so long. He would compliment me, make me laugh, and his subtle, playful remarks would leave me feeling flattered. There was something intoxicating about the way he made me feel desired, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I felt alive again. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to throw my relationship away. But the emotional disconnect with James was undeniable, and Alex's presence began to fill that void. He would send little texts, asking how my day was going, reminding me of a joke we shared over lunch. I found myself looking forward to those messages, eagerly anticipating our next conversation. I started to tell him things I hadn't even shared with James. It wasn't intentional, but there was a comfort in talking to him. I began to realize just how starved for attention I had become. The smallest gestures from Alex felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the indifference I felt at home. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just friendship, but deep down, I knew it was more. I was slowly crossing a line, and I could feel the tension building inside me. I didn't want to hurt James, but the connection I felt with Alex was undeniable, and it scared me. The more time I spent with Alex, the more my thoughts became clouded. There was a part of me that wanted to shut it all down, to walk away from the growing attraction before things got out of hand, but another part of me, one that I wasn't ready to confront, was drawn to the excitement, the thrill of something new. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. Alex understood me in ways I hadn't realized I needed. The tipping point came one afternoon when we stayed late at the office to finish a project. It was just the two of us, and after a long day of work, the energy between us shifted. He offered to walk me to my car, and the casual goodbye turned into a lingering conversation. We were standing close, the soft glow of the streetlights casting shadows over our faces. Our words became quieter, more intimate, and for a moment, the world around us disappeared. "Are you happy?" Alex asked, his voice soft but genuine. I hesitated, my mind spinning. I thought about James, about all the years we'd spent together, and the emptiness I felt. I looked into Alex's eyes, and something shifted inside me. I felt seen, understood. I hadn't felt that in so long. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "I thought I was, but lately, it's been different." Alex's gaze never wavered, and in that moment, I realized how much I longed for something more. We stood there for a moment, the silence hanging between us, and then he took a small step forward. I didn't move away. My heart raced, my body felt tense with anticipation. He leaned in slowly, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I considered pulling back. But I didn't. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but as the seconds passed, it became more urgent, more desperate. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a release. All the emotions I had been holding back, all the frustration, the loneliness, and the desire for something more, poured into that kiss. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing that made sense. When we pulled away, there was no need for words. The silence between us said everything. I was already caught in the web, and there was no turning back. I didn't know where this would lead, but in that moment, all I could think about was how alive I felt. The emptiness inside me had been filled, and I wasn't ready to let it go. The guilt came later, creeping in when I was alone with my thoughts. But the excitement, the rush of emotion, was too strong to ignore. I had crossed a line, and now I had to live with the consequences. But for now, I wasn't ready to face them. The affair wasn't something I planned, yet it had become a reality. That first kiss with Alex had ignited something inside me, something I couldn't easily extinguish. I tried to convince myself that it was a one-time mistake, but deep down I knew better. The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and the excitement I felt every time I saw him made it harder to turn away. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. We continued texting, meeting up for lunch, stealing moments alone whenever we could. Every interaction was like a drug, a fix I didn't want to break free from. I couldn't help myself. Every time I saw him, I felt my heart race. I convinced myself that what I was doing wasn't a betrayal, it was just an escape. James hadn't been paying attention to me, hadn't been meeting my emotional needs. Alex was simply filling the gap that had been left wide open. Each encounter with Alex was a rush, but it came with a growing sense of guilt. I had never imagined myself in this position. I'd never thought I would be someone capable of cheating. But now it was happening, and the more I tried to justify it, the more it felt like I was losing control. Every stolen kiss, every secret conversation, chipped away at the loyalty I once had for James. I had always believed in honesty, in love that was pure, but now I was tangled in lies and half-truths. I would return home to James, trying to act normal, trying to push down the knowledge that I was deceiving him. Our conversations felt strained, almost like a performance. I would pretend to listen, pretending that nothing had changed. But inside, I was a mess. I would lie awake at night, guilt clawing at me, wondering if James could sense the shift in me. He hadn't said. The moment the truth came to light, everything shattered. It wasn't a grand confrontation. It wasn't some dramatic scene you see in movies. No, it happened quietly, almost casually, when James picked up my phone one evening while I was in the shower. I hadn't intended for it to happen. I wasn't being careless, at least not in the way I thought. But the messages were there. Every single one. Every flirtatious exchange. Every stolen word. Every lingering promise. It was all laid bare for him to see. I had never seen James so quiet. His face was pale, his eyes wide as he scrolled through the screen. The reality of what I had done settled over me in an instant. There was no escaping it. I could try to explain, try to come up with an excuse, but I knew that nothing I said would change the fact that I had betrayed him. Betrayed us. I had crossed a line, and now there was no way to take it back. When I walked out of the bathroom, I could feel the tension in the air. James didn't look at me. He didn't say anything at first. He just held the phone in front of me, the words on the screen burning into my mind. "How long?" he asked, his voice low, almost too calm. I couldn't answer right away. The guilt in my chest was suffocating, and the truth hit harder than anything I had expected. I wanted to tell him it was a mistake, that I hadn't meant for it to happen, but how could I? It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. I had made the choice over and over again, and now the consequences were staring me in the face. "Please, James," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you." The words were hollow, meaningless. What could I possibly say to make this right? But he didn't respond. He just turned away, walking out of the room without another word. The silence was deafening. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. I had never seen him like this before. He wasn't angry, not at first. He wasn't screaming or throwing things. He was just done. And that was worse than anything. The absence of emotion from him felt like the ultimate rejection. The man I thought I knew had disappeared, and in his place was a stranger. For the rest of the night, we didn't speak. The house was still, too still, like time itself had stopped. I stayed in our bedroom, waiting for him to come back, to yell at me, to say anything. But nothing came. It felt like the world had collapsed in on itself. The shame and regret washed over me in waves, but it didn't matter. I had done it. I had ruined everything. The next morning he was gone. He didn't leave a note, didn't pack a bag. He just vanished. I searched the house for signs that he was still there, but nothing. It was like he had erased himself from my life completely. I called him, sent messages, but got nothing in return. The silence was suffocating. I knew I had to face the consequences, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I couldn't bear the thought of him walking away for good, but I couldn't blame him for it either. Alex, of course, knew about it immediately. I told him what happened, the words tumbling out in a flood of panic and guilt. "I think I ruined everything," I said, my voice breaking. "James is gone, and I don't know what to do." Alex tried to comfort me, but there was a strange distance in his voice. He said all the right things, how he would be there for me, how we could figure things out, but I knew the truth. He wasn't here to help me fix my broken relationship. He was here because I had chosen him. And now I was realizing that wasn't enough either. I had crossed a line with Alex too, but it felt different. There was no clarity in our connection. There was no certainty about what we were or even if we would be. He wasn't the solution to my problems. He was just another complication. Days passed, and James still hadn't returned. My calls went unanswered. I didn't know where he had gone, or if he even intended to come back. The house felt like a ghost town, and the weight of my actions pressed down on me with every passing second. I had broken him, and in doing so, I had broken myself too. I wasn't sure what I expected from James when he found out, but I had never imagined this kind of devastation. I tried to reach out to him through mutual friends, but no one knew where he was. They were all shocked, of course, asking how I could let something like this happen. They didn't understand. They didn't know how far I had fallen, how desperate I had become for something that wasn't even real. I tried to explain, but there were no words that could undo what I had done. Weeks went by, and James still didn't come back. He didn't ask for space or time to think. He just left, and I was left here, dealing with the aftermath of my own decisions. The guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't take back what had happened. All I had left now were the empty spaces, the unanswered questions, and the slow realization that the person I had become was someone I didn't even recognize. I had destroyed something real, something valuable, and I was left with nothing but the ruins of my own making. And Alex? He had become a shadow in my life. We had moments together, but they were fleeting, filled with uncertainty. I wasn't sure if he even cared the way I needed him to, and he didn't know how to fix what I had broken. I didn't know if I could fix it either. I had lost everything, and there was no way to get it back. The days after everything fell apart felt like an endless loop of regret and self-loathing. I found myself constantly replaying the moments leading up to the affair, wondering where I had gone wrong. The guilt didn't stop. It was a constant companion, eating away at me from the inside. I kept thinking about James, wondering if he was okay, if he was ever going to come back. Every time I picked up my phone, I hoped for a message, a sign that maybe he was still willing to work things out, but there was nothing. It was as if he had vanished from my life entirely. I spent hours staring at my phone, writing and deleting messages, trying to find the right words to send, but none seemed right. Nothing could undo the damage I had caused. I had destroyed the trust we built over years, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. I wasn't even sure if he wanted me to fix it. I told myself I didn't deserve a second chance, that I had thrown everything away for a fleeting moment of excitement. But even as the days passed, I couldn't help but hold on to the hope that James might come back, that we might somehow find our way back to each other. But that hope slowly began to fade. The reality of what I had done started to sink in, and with it came the harsh truth. I had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. James had trusted me, loved me, and I had broken that bond. There was no excuse for what I did. I could blame the emptiness in our relationship, the lack of attention, or even excitement that Alex brought into my life, but the truth was, I chose to cheat. I could have talked to James, communicated my feelings, but I didn't. I let things fester, and in doing so, I betrayed the one person who mattered most. Alex was still in the picture, but it was different now. The excitement, the thrill of the affair, had worn off. I had built something up in my mind, a fantasy that was now crashing down around me. I realized that I had been using him as a distraction, a way to escape the reality of my own failure. When I looked at him now, I didn't feel the same connection. It wasn't that he had changed, I had changed. The affair had left me empty, and I didn't know